Lee Ji-hye was forced into a marriage to save her family's honor, a cruel substitution for the sister who ran away from her duty. Min-jun saw her as an arrogant obstacle, a pawn in a game of corporate power, but his cold disdain for her was a mask for his own family's deep-seated betrayals. When a sinister plot threatened to tear their worlds apart, they found an unexpected strength in each other. Now the battle is over, and a love that grew from hatred has found its triumphant conclusion. The name Han Min-jun resonated with power and prestige. As the heir to the sprawling Han tech conglomerate, he was a figure of impeccable ambition and cold, sharp calculation. For him, the world was a chessboard, and every person, every decision was a piece to be moved with a purpose. He had no time for frivolous emotions, no space in his perfectly structured life for something as unpredictable as love. His one true passion was his family's legacy, the ever-expanding empire he was destined to command. So when a strategic merger was proposed with the formidable Lee Pharmaceuticals, he saw it not as a personal event, but as the logical, necessary next step in his grand plan. The contract was clear, the terms were favorable, and the prospective bride was Lee Ji-yoon, the younger daughter, celebrated for her exquisite grace and flawless beauty. She was the perfect asset, a delicate and refined piece to solidify her position and expand her power. The day of the formal engagement arrived, a day that was supposed to be a mere formality, a simple signature to seal a powerful alliance. The grand ballroom was filled with the glittering elite of Seoul, the air thick with anticipation and hushed conversations. Min-jun stood at the center of it all, a man of quiet authority and unshakable confidence, waiting for the woman who would become his bride. But the woman who appeared was not Ji-yoon. Instead, a different figure emerged, one who moved with a kind of deliberate, unapologetic presence. It was Lee Ji-hye, the elder sister. She was a stark contrast to the ethereal image of her younger sibling. While Ji-yoon was a delicate orchid, Ji-hye was a confident, wild rose. Her beauty sharp, her demeanor unyielding. She was known not for her beauty, but for her sharp tongue and an even sharper mind, a reputation she wore like a coat of armor. She was dressed in a simple yet elegant hanbok, a choice that seemed to challenge the ostentatious display of wealth around her. As she approached, her eyes, dark and intense, met Min-jun's, and in their depths he saw not the expected submission or shy deference. He saw defiance, unbridled, absolute. The murmur of the crowd fell silent as she reached the podium. A hush descended upon the room, a tangible stillness that amplified her every word. "My sister, Ji-yoon, has run away," she announced, her voice steady and clear, without a hint of shame or apology. "She has refused this marriage, and so, as the elder daughter of the Lee family, I will take her place." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. A collective gasp rippled through the stunned audience. Min-jun's perfectly constructed world shattered in that instant. His shock, a sudden cold wave of disbelief, quickly boiled into a simmering hatred. This woman, this audacious substitute, was not a strategic asset. She was a liability, an arrogant, brazen obstacle who had dared to disrupt his carefully laid plans. She was a second-rate replacement for the flawless Ji-yoon, and her very presence was an insult to his intelligence and a challenge to his authority. He loathed her for her audacity, for the shame she had brought upon his family, and for the sheer recklessness of her actions. As he looked at her, he saw not a future partner, but a woman who had just declared war on him and his entire world. The audience, much like Min-jun himself, is caught in this moment of pure shock and animosity, left to wonder how a relationship could possibly blossom from such a hostile, impossible beginning. Their marriage was a contract, a piece of paper that bound them in name, but separated them by a chasm of cold disdain. Forced to live under the same roof, their cohabitation was less a home and more a battlefield of passive aggression, a silent war of wills waged in pristine, minimalist hallways and cavernous, empty rooms. Min-jun's resentment was a palpable presence, a chill in the air whenever Ji-hye entered the room. He saw her as an unwanted intruder, a constant reminder of the chaos she had brought to his perfectly ordered life. But Ji-hye, true to her nature, refused to be a docile, silent wife. She was not content to be a mere figurehead. Instead, she demanded a role in the company, taking charge of a department that was teetering on the brink of failure, a division Min-jun had already mentally written off. The move was audacious, a blatant challenge to his authority, and it only fueled his initial fury. Yet, as he watched her from a distance, a grudging admiration began to stir beneath his anger. She didn't just talk, she acted. She worked with an intensity that rivaled his own, arriving before dawn and leaving long after dusk. In the cutthroat world of corporate boardrooms, Ji-hye was a revelation. She was fiercely competent, her arguments were sharp and well-reasoned, and her insights into the market were shockingly accurate. She would openly challenge Min-jun's decisions, not out of spite, but with a logical clarity that he couldn't easily dismiss. He would argue back, his voice low and controlled, but her points were so well-researched, so grounded in fact, that they often forced him to reconsider his own strategy. Their verbal sparring became a strange, exhilarating dance, a clash of intellects that left everyone else in the room stunned into silence. One evening, as a cold rain pattered against the windows of their vast, silent home, Min-jun found himself in the study, his thoughts a jumbled mess of business reports and Ji-hye's surprisingly effective tactics. He heard her voice from a dimly lit sitting room nearby, low and serious. Thinking she was talking to a colleague, he paused, listening. "I know this marriage is a sham," she said, her voice laced with a bitter honesty. "I know this is not how things were supposed to be." A flicker of something akin to guilt passed through Min-jun, but then her tone hardened and he froze. "But I will not let you see our family business fail. This merger will happen, and I will make sure of it." The words struck Min-jun with the force of a revelation. His initial hatred, the easy, visceral emotion he had clung to, began to wane, slowly replaced by a growing sense of intrigue. He started watching her not with contempt, but with a new, intense curiosity. He began to see the facade he had created for her crack. Was her defiance merely a mask for her fierce loyalty? Was her cold exterior a shield she used to protect her family's interests, just as he did? What was her true motivation? Was she really trying to save her family? Or was there something deeper, something more personal driving her? The initial feeling of hostility that had defined their relationship had now been replaced by a captivating mystery. The audience, much like Min-jun, is drawn into this intricate puzzle, questioning everything they thought they knew about Lee Ji-hye and the circumstances that had brought her into his life. The air in the office was thick with the scent of stale coffee and impending failure. The project Ji-hye was spearheading, a bold initiative to launch a new pharmaceutical product, was teetering on the brink of collapse. For weeks, they had been fighting a losing battle against a smear campaign. False rumors about the product's safety were spreading like wildfire through online forums and whispered conversations in boardrooms, chipping away at public trust and investor confidence. Min-jun, with his cold, analytical eye, had initially dismissed the rumors as a simple business rivalry, but as he delved deeper, the pattern became chillingly familiar. The tactics, the subtle manipulation of the media, the calculated leaks of misinformation, were the signature moves of a ghost from his past. He knew this ruthless strategy all too well. It was the same weapon his estranged uncle had used years ago to try and wrest control of Hantech from his father. A sense of dread, cold and unsettling, crept into his heart. He knew that this wasn't just a corporate rivalry, it was a personal attack, a deliberate attempt to ruin their alliance and, by extension, them. Ji-hye, always a fortress of strength and composure, was slowly crumbling under the relentless pressure. Late one night, Min-jun found her hunched over her desk, a mountain of reports scattered around her. The fierce determination he had come to admire was gone, replaced by a profound exhaustion. As he approached, she didn't look up. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the soft, rhythmic click of his shoes on the polished floor. "It's over," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We can't stop it." For the first time, he saw her without her armor, and the sight was disarming. Her shoulders were slumped, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a crumpled piece of paper. He sat down opposite her, the vast mahogany desk between them suddenly feeling like a small, insignificant barrier. "I'm not doing this for myself," she confessed, the words thick with the weight of unshed tears. "Ji-yoon, my sister, she left me a letter. She was in love with someone else, and she pleaded with me to save her from this fate, to not let her be married to a man she didn't love." A single tear finally escaped, tracing a path down her pale cheek. "I made a promise to protect her, and to protect our family's honor." In that moment, the wall that had stood between them for so long, a fortress, misunderstanding, and pride, crumbled into dust. Min-jun no longer saw the defiant woman who had challenged his every move. He saw a sister who had sacrificed her own happiness and freedom for the sake of her family. He saw her pain, her burden, and her unwavering loyalty. The tension that had once defined their interactions, fueled by their constant sparring, suddenly shifted. The air was no longer charged with animosity, but with a different kind of energy, a powerful, unspoken attraction born from this moment of shared vulnerability and profound respect. The viewer, witnessing this intimate confession, feels the seismic shift from conflict to a powerful and undeniable connection, realizing that what they once saw as a hostile alliance was, in fact, a selfless act of love and sacrifice. The storm had passed. Min-jun, his resolve hardened by the revelation of his uncle's treachery, had moved with a swift and calculated precision that was both terrifying and brilliant. He had used his vast influence to meticulously expose the rival company's lies, revealing the fraudulent nature of their smear campaign to the press and the public. He provided irrefutable evidence, a trail of digital breadcrumbs that led directly back to his uncle, a man who had once been family but was now a rival in the shadows. The rival company's reputation was shattered, their stock plummeted, and Ji-hye's project was not only saved but had emerged stronger, with newfound public trust and support. When the dust of the corporate battle finally settled, a fragile peace settled between them. Ji-hye, walking through the quiet, darkened halls of the office building late one night, found Min-jun in his private study. He stood by the window, the city lights below a distant, blurry mosaic. The powerful, commanding air she knew was gone. In his place was a man who looked tired, burdened by a weight she now understood. "I should have trusted you sooner," he said, his voice quiet, raw with an honesty she had never heard from him before. He didn't turn to face her, his gaze still fixed on the city below. "I judged you based on what I thought you were, not who you are." He finally turned, his eyes meeting hers, and in their depths she saw not the cold indifference she was used to, but a deep regret. He began to speak, revealing a part of himself he had kept locked away for a lifetime. He spoke of his father's unwavering expectations, a constant, suffocating pressure to be perfect. He told her about his uncle's relentless ambition, the constant fear of being outmaneuvered, a fear that had made him suspicious of everyone, including her. His cold exterior, he confessed, was a shield, a product of a lifetime of betrayal and the relentless pressure to be a fortress, to never show a single weakness. Ji-hye listened, her heart softening with a profound compassion. She saw the man behind the persona, the boy who had been forced to grow up too quickly, whose heart had been hardened by a world that saw people as nothing more than pawns. She realized with a sudden, painful clarity that they were not so different. They were two people bound by a contract who had found themselves fighting the same battles for family honor, for legacy, and for survival in a ruthless world. The moment was no longer about a business deal, or a contract, or a sham marriage. It was about mutual understanding, shared pain, and the quiet, unspoken agreement to protect each other. The old tension, the animosity that had once defined them, had melted away, replaced by a deep, undeniable connection. The audience, much like Ji-hye, feels a cathartic release in this moment, as the central conflict between the characters finally resolves, and a genuine, deeply felt relationship begins to form, built not on strategic alliances, but on the foundation of shared truth and vulnerability. The merger was a resounding success, a triumph born from the ashes of a corporate war. Min-jun and Ji-hye stood side by side on a brightly lit stage, facing a sea of flashing cameras and a wall of reporters. They were no longer just strategic partners. They were a united front, a symbol of strength and integrity. Min-jun's hand rested gently on the small of Ji-hye's back, a gesture that was both possessive and protective. She glanced at him, and in his eyes she saw not the cold, calculating heir she had met on their engagement day, but a man who looked at her with a warmth that was entirely new. As the press conference drew to a close, a celebratory buzz filled the room. The cameras flashed one last time before the lights dimmed. Min-jun, with a subtle nod, guided Ji-hye away from the crowd and into a quiet hallway. The air was still and private, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just left behind. He turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. His grip was firm but gentle. "The contract," he began, his voice low and earnest, "was for Ji-yoon. It was a business deal, a piece of paper that didn't mean anything to me beyond its strategic value." He paused, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "But I realized that the one I married, the one I want to be with, is you, Lee Ji-hye." A genuine, warm smile, a smile that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners, spread across his face. It was a sight she had never thought she would see, a glimpse of the man who had been hidden behind layers of ambition and duty. "I'm tearing up the old contract," he said, his voice filled with a hopeful reverence. "I want to make a new one, a contract based on mutual respect, trust, and love." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. As he opened it, a simple, elegant silver ring nestled inside caught the light. It wasn't a diamond, not a flashy display of wealth. It was a simple, beautiful circle, a symbol of their journey. He wasn't asking for her hand for a merger. He was asking for her heart for a lifetime. Tears welled up in Ji-hye's eyes, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming rush of emotions. She had gone from being a proxy, a substitute bride, to becoming his partner in every sense of the word. She had gone from being despised, a brazen obstacle to his plans, to being loved, truly and unconditionally. The story, which began with cold calculation and simmering hatred, had found its powerful emotional climax. As Min-jun looked at her, his expression a perfect blend of hope and vulnerability, she knew the answer. She nodded, her tears finally overflowing, and a soft, joyous laugh escaped her lips. Their journey had been a difficult one, filled with misunderstandings and conflict, but through it all, they had found a love that was not a strategic alliance, but a deep, genuine connection forged in fire. The ending brought a sense of fulfillment and joy, a testament to the idea that true happiness can be found in the most unexpected places, even within a marriage contract that was never meant to be.